You wipe the rifle clean with a rag that smells faintly of machine oil and desert dust. The fluorescent lights above hum like restless bees, casting their tired glow on the weapon laid out across the steel table. You don't think about the room around you. You don't think about the stack of paperwork or the endless list of chores waiting on the duty board. You focus only on the groove of the barrel, the cool weight of the metal, the strange comfort of repetition. One motion at a time, you clear the grime as if clearing the ghosts that still cling to you. You probably won't survive this, at least not the way you once survived firefights, sandstorms, and convoys ambushed on lonely roads. Survival here looks quieter, almost invisible, like breathing in a world that isn't built to notice you anymore. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the time where you're watching from. I want to know who's out there keeping me company tonight. The rifle doesn't lie. On its body, near the buttstock, there are faint scratches, deliberate ones, carved slowly into the surface. At first, you thought they were just marks from rough handling. But as you trace them with your fingertip, the pattern is undeniable. One line, then another, grouped by fives, stacked in tiny rows. They're not just marks, they're counts, kill counts. The colonel notices before you can cover them. He doesn't barge in with thunder, doesn't announce himself with heavy boots. He just lingers in the doorway, a tall silhouette against the bright hallway, silent until the sound of your rag squeaking across metal dies down. You mind explaining that? His voice is steady, not sharp, but it cuts deeper than any reprimand. You glance up, realizing his eyes aren't on you. They're locked on the engravings. This moment, this strange intersection of weapon maintenance and unspoken history, stretches longer than any firefight you endured. And maybe that's what rattles you. Because unlike the chaos of war, this room is calm. It's the colonel's silence that unsettles you, the way he waits, the way he seems to weigh what he's seeing against the version of you he thought he knew. Veteran stories like yours aren't always captured in headlines, but they echo in the corridors of military hospitals and VA offices. Last year, an article spotlighted female snipers from conflicts abroad, women who served in roles the public rarely talks about. Some were praised as national heroes, others dismissed as myths, yet all carried the same invisible ink of their pasts. It reminded you that kill counts aren't just numbers. They're proof that war doesn't discriminate in who it breaks or who it molds into something the world doesn't expect. The quirky part? In one piece from a military history blog, they noted how some soldiers in older wars carved tally marks not on rifles but on their helmets, boots, or even mess kits. Ordinary objects turned into quiet ledgers of survival. A boot scuffed by desert marches might hide more truth than an official commendation. Still, commentary rolls heavy across veterans' forums. Should kill counts ever be displayed? Some argue it's pride, others say it's shame, and a few insist it's simply memory. One Marine posted, "My rifle had more scratches than my back after a field op, but none of those lines tell my story." And yet, in another corner of the thread, a woman veteran pushed back. "Those scratches kept me alive, because they reminded me what I was capable of when no one else believed it." Back in the room, the colonel steps closer. His shadow swallows the table as his gaze flickers from the rifle to your hands. You don't speak. Not yet. Because what can you say? That those marks aren't yours? That they belong to the woman you were when the air reeked of cordite and the sky hummed with drone wings? Or do you admit that yes, every line carries weight you can't set down, not even here in this sterile building with its polished floors and its polite silence? You don't answer, not because you can't, but because the question itself isn't really his to ask. The rifle answers for you. It gleams faintly under the fluorescent lights, as if daring the world to look closer at what's been hidden in plain sight all along. The colonel finally exhales, a sound that seems louder than it should. "You're not who they said you were," he mutters, not looking at you now, but at the sum of those lines, the unshakable math of them. And in that moment, you realize survival isn't about moving forward unseen. It's about what happens when someone notices what's been there all along, and you're forced to decide whether to stay silent or finally tell the truth. The colonel's words hang in the air like smoke that refuses to dissipate. You grip the rag tighter, suddenly aware of the oil seeping into your fingers. The rifle lies between you like a confession neither of you intended to hear, a ledger of lives taken etched into steel. You wish you could laugh it off, call them scratches from bad handling or dents from too many deployments, but you know better, and so does he. You set the rag down, careful not to make a sound, and glance at him. His jaw tightens, eyes narrowing slightly, not in judgment but in calculation. He's running numbers in his head, trying to match the tally marks with the records he's read, the commendations filed, the unconfirmed reports buried in after-action summaries. He thought he knew you. He thought the story was simpler, another soldier who did her job and came home. But those marks say otherwise. Those marks suggest a soldier who didn't just survive but altered the battlefield itself. They suggest you weren't only there, you were pivotal. And that's a truth the system rarely likes to acknowledge, especially when it's carved into the hands of someone like you. News stories occasionally break through with glimpses of similar realities. Last month, a feature in Military Times explored female combat veterans who had records few dared to discuss. One sniper from the Iraq War revealed she had been credited unofficially with over 30 confirmed kills, though her service documents reduced her role to scout observer. Her story sparked heated arguments. Why the downplaying? Why the erasure? The answer was complicated, part bureaucracy, part politics, part the military's discomfort with certain narratives. And then there's the surprising tidbit buried in an old Stars and Stripes piece. Some Y2 female partisans in Eastern Europe were said to keep their tallies on cloth armbands instead of weapons, sewing tiny stitches for each enemy downed. It was both practical and symbolic. A piece of fabric could outlast a rifle, and each stitch doubled as camouflage for grief. Strange, almost poetic, that even in war, record-keeping found its way into fabric and thread. The colonel's silence breaks when he pulls out the metal chair opposite you. He sits slowly, deliberately, as though taking a position in a negotiation, not an interrogation. His eyes never leave the rifle. "How many?" he asks quietly. You stare at him, then at the weapon. The marks are right there, arranged in neat rows. You could count them out loud, let the rhythm of numbers fill the room. But that feels wrong. They're not numbers, they're nights without sleep, villages in ruin, comrades saved and innocents lost. You don't speak, and he notices. He leans forward, resting his elbows on the table. You know the problem isn't the number. The problem is what it means that it was never written down. That's when the sting hits, not from his words, but from the truth. Because for years you've lived in a strange duality. The official story, with its bland language of served with distinction, and the unofficial story, scratched into steel by hands too steady to deny. The official version makes you invisible. The unofficial makes you unforgettable. And in the gap between them lies your silence. On veteran forums, debates rage about this very silence. One thread that exploded after the NBC News piece on women in combat carried dozens of comments. Some said kill counts should never matter, that they glorify violence. Others said erasure is worse, because it robs veterans of the truth of what they endured. One poster, himself a former infantryman, wrote, "The worst part isn't being judged for what you did. It's being ignored, as if you never did it at all." And under that, a reply from a woman veteran, "Exactly. They left me off the roster for a firefight I led. That's not mercy. That's theft." The colonel leans back now, studying you. You never told anyone. You shake your head, though the answer feels obvious. Who would you tell? A system that wanted you to fade into statistics? A community that whispers exaggeration whenever women speak of combat? Even in support groups, you've heard the sighs, the disbelief. Better to say nothing. Better to let the weapon hold the truth in silence. But silence has a cost, and tonight it feels heavier than the rifle itself. There's a fringe fact you remember reading once, late at night, when insomnia drove you to scroll through obscure military history blogs. It said that some Cold War snipers, both men and women, would intentionally mismark their rifles to confuse intelligence officers if captured. A false count, a decoy story scratched into wood, meant to protect the real narrative. And you wonder, just for a second, if maybe that's what you should have done, scribbled lies into the steel, given yourself a cover story that no one could unravel. But you didn't. You carved truth. Now the colonel knows it. He finally exhales, long and slow, rubbing a hand over his face. You realize what this means, right? His voice is calm, but his eyes are lit with something sharper, recognition. They told me you were a survivor. They didn't tell me you were a force. It's almost laughable, almost cruel. They gave you medals for endurance, but not for impact. They praised your resilience, but buried your firepower. And now, because of a few scratches in steel, the mask has cracked open. The colonel pushes the rifle gently back toward you. His hand lingers on it, as if reluctant to let go. Keep it clean, he says softly, but don't clean off the truth. For the first time in years, you feel the weight of silence shifting. The rifle isn't just a tool or a relic. It's a voice, a record, and the world, whether it's ready or not, has just noticed. The colonel's words still echo in your head as the room grows quieter, the hum of the overhead lights swallowing everything else. Don't clean off the truth. You never expected him to say that. You half expected scolding, half expected dismissal, anything but validation. Yet here you are, sitting in front of the rifle like it's an open diary, its engravings laid bare, and for the first time someone reads them without turning away. But validation doesn't erase suspicion. His gaze lingers, and you feel it, the way an officer calculates the balance between trust and doubt. You sense he's not just seeing you anymore, he's reconsidering everything he's been told about you. And that's when the shift happens, the twist that unsettles the air between you. The power dynamic reverses. You thought he'd interrogate, maybe reprimand. Instead, you watch as he begins to fidget, adjusting his uniform sleeves, tapping his fingers on the table. It's not you under the microscope anymore. It's him. It's the institution he represents, the polished chain of command that decided not to record what those marks say. For the first time, it looks like he's the one being questioned. You remember stories that never made it into official channels but surfaced in scattered reports. One in particular from AP News still rattles you. A female Marine in Afghanistan was hailed locally as a hero by villagers after fending off an attack, yet her name never appeared in the mission debrief. The official record credited supporting units. The unofficial truth lived only in whispers and in the grateful eyes of the people she'd protected. That was the kind of story that gnawed at you. Heroism disfigured by bureaucracy. And there's another tidbit, quirky in its strangeness. In an old Federal News Network interview, a retired Army historian admitted that kill counts were sometimes erased not for secrecy, but because they complicated morale reports. Imagine that, your lived moments, the weight of lives taken or saved, rubbed out of history for the sake of keeping charts clean. The colonel finally breaks the silence. You know, he says, voice lower now, those numbers don't just rewrite your story, they rewrite mine. You tilt your head, confused. He leans forward. I was there. Different sector, different year. They told me the sharpshooter who cleared that ridge was someone else. I believed it. I passed that story on. And now, looking at this. His voice trails off, but the weight of his realization hangs heavy. You realize then that the rifle doesn't just alter your own past, it reshapes his. He's forced to confront that he's been carrying a false narrative, unknowingly complicit in your erasure. And that truth stings him in ways you hadn't anticipated. On social media, debates about veterans' erased or rewritten roles spark waves of anger. Just last week, a thread on a popular veterans subreddit flared with thousands of comments after a woman shared that her Bronze Star citation omitted her name from a firefight she led. One commenter wrote, "They'll decorate the gear before they decorate us." Another responded with sharp sarcasm, "Guess bullets don't discriminate, but paperwork does." The thread spiraled into discussions of accountability, with some arguing that rewriting these records decades later might destabilize the chain of honors, while others argued silence only deepens the wound. And that's the atmosphere you sense now, contained in this one room. The colonel isn't just staring at a rifle, he's staring at the crack in the institution's armor, one that demands he decide whether to protect it or expose it. You watch his jaw tighten again, and for a moment you almost pity him. He's trapped in his own contradiction, the loyal officer versus the witness of truth. And that's when you recognize the shift. He's no longer in control here. You are. Because every time his eyes flicker back to those marks, you know he's silently recalculating not only who you are, but who he is in relation to you. He thought he carried authority. Now he carries the burden of recognition, and recognition is heavier than any command. You recall a fringe anecdote, half forgotten but fitting. During the Balkan conflicts of the 90s, a journalist once noted that female snipers terrified opposing forces not only for their skill, but for the way they shattered assumptions. Their presence forced enemies to admit the battlefield wasn't ruled by the usual script. One commander allegedly told his troops, "Fear the women, because if they're here, the war is already upside down." You think about that now because maybe that's what the colonel feels, his world flipped upside down by scratches on steel. Finally he asks, "Why didn't you say anything all these years?" His tone isn't accusatory. It's weary, like he's already bracing for an answer that will implicate more than just you. You shrug, though your chest feels tight. "Would you have believed me?" His silence is the answer you already knew. The twist sharpens when he leans back and whispers something you never expected. "I need you to tell it, not just for you, for me." It stuns you, the way power shifts so quickly. A moment ago you felt caught, cornered by his gaze. Now you're the one holding a truth he desperately needs, because his own legacy is tangled in yours. If your tally marks are real, then his reports are flawed. If your silence is broken, then his authority changes shape. The rifle lies between you, no longer just a weapon, no longer just a confession. It has become leverage. Outside this room, you know debates continue. Veterans groups argue whether rewriting records dishonors the dead or honors the living. Some call it revisionist history, others call it long overdue justice. But in here, in this quiet standoff of recognition, you see the twist clearly. For years you thought silence was weakness. Now you see silence was control. And breaking it doesn't just set you free. It forces those around you to confront what they've ignored. The colonel exhales again, heavy this time. His eyes lift to yours, searching, maybe pleading. You don't look away. For once, you don't feel small under the weight of his rank. You feel steady, anchored by truth carved into steel. And in that stillness, you realize the battlefield has followed you home. Only this time the war isn't outside. It's inside these walls. Inside the silence. Inside the stories waiting to be told. The room doesn't change when you open your mouth, but everything inside you does. Words that have been buried for years edge to the surface, reluctant, shaky, like soldiers emerging from a bunker after the shelling stops. The colonel waits. His stillness is uncanny. No pen tapping, no cough, no rustle of fabric. Just silence. Patient but weighted, like he knows that the moment you begin, nothing will ever be the same again. You take a breath and finally let it out. They said it wasn't my mission, that I was just there to observe, but when the dust cleared, it was my rifle still smoking. Your voice sounds foreign, rough around the edges. And after that, they didn't want details written down. Just success. Clean lines in reports, none of the mess that followed us back. The colonel doesn't flinch, but his eyes sharpen. You can see the memory tracing in him, the puzzle pieces realigning with every word you speak. He's not shocked that it happened. He's shocked that you've finally chosen to speak it aloud. There's an old article from News VA you once read in a waiting room, highlighting the challenges female veterans face in being recognized for combat service. It mentioned a woman whose official file listed her as administrative support, even though she had fought in a firefight that cost her 2 friends. The story never left you because of one line she said, "My name was absent, but the bullet holes in my gear weren't." You think about that now because your rifle bears its own testimony, only no one ever asked to hear it. And then there's the quirky fact you once laughed about bitterly in a support group. In ancient times, women who fought were sometimes honored in poetry but omitted from rosters. Imagine that. Your name immortalized in verse but struck from the roll call. History always seems to prefer women as symbols rather than as soldiers. The colonel leans forward, elbows resting on the cold table. "Do you understand how much this changes?" You give a dry laugh. "For you? Maybe. For me? It changes nothing. I've lived with it since the first mark. But that's not entirely true. Speaking it aloud feels different, like tearing the duct tape off a wound you've kept covered for years. It stings, but it breathes. On forums, debates rage every time a female veteran shares such stories. Just last week, a military.com article about women in Iraq reignited online arguments. Some commenters dismissed kill counts as bravado, others accused the system of deliberate erasure. One post in particular went viral. "If women weren't out there in combat, explain why my buddy came home alive because of one." The comment drew thousands of upvotes and hundreds of replies, some angry, some supportive, all circling the same truth. People are still uncomfortable with the idea of women not only surviving war but shaping its outcomes. And that discomfort bleeds into policy. For every step forward, there's hesitation, red tape, debates over medals, revisions of service records. It's never straightforward. And you feel the same tension now in the way the Colonel's eyes flicker, between wanting to honor your story and fearing the fallout of acknowledging it. You look down at the rifle again, tracing the engravings with your thumb. Every mark cost me something. Sleep, friends, pieces of myself I'll never get back. And what did I get in return? A certificate that didn't even mention what I did. The Colonel swallows hard. For a second, you think you see guilt flash across his face, like he carries responsibility not just for himself but for the system that taught him to look away. He doesn't deny it, though. He doesn't try to soothe you with excuses about paperwork or politics. Instead, he says something else. You should tell your story. The words hang between you, heavier than any order he's ever given. And here's the twist. You never thought you'd hear that from someone like him. Officers often keep things neat, bound by protocol, uninterested in complicating the narrative. Yet here he is, urging you toward the one thing you've avoided for years. Speaking publicly, making the hidden visible. You wonder if he knows what he's asking. You imagine the faces of others like you, the Marine whose citation left her out, the sniper who stitched her tallies into cloth, the women who returned from war only to be folded back into invisibility. If you speak, you carry all of them with you. But if you stay silent, you leave them in the dark. A surprising tidbit comes to mind, one you found in a BBC profile of veterans in Europe. A historian there said, when women finally told their stories, the nation relearned the war. You remember that line because it suggested something radical, that one hidden voice can alter an entire country's understanding of history. And now, sitting across from the Colonel, you feel the weight of that possibility pressing against you. "I'm not sure they're ready," you whisper. "Maybe they're not," he replies, "but that doesn't mean you stay." Silence serves them, not you. And suddenly, the confrontation shifts again. This isn't about his recognition anymore. It's about your reclamation. You thought you'd be interrogated, but instead you're being handed a choice. Continue the silence, or claim the voice that's been waiting inside you all along. Outside, you imagine the rest of the base continues with its routine. Boots pounding pavement during drills, phones ringing in offices, coffee poured into paper cups. Life as usual. But in this small room, the ordinary has cracked open to reveal the extraordinary. A confrontation not just with the Colonel, but with the truth of your own existence. The rifle gleams under the harsh light, the tally marks casting faint shadows that seem to stretch farther than the metal itself. They reach into the years you've hidden, the lives that were ended, the comrades saved, the battles fought in silence. They reach into the present, forcing the Colonel to see you, forcing you to see yourself. And in that moment, for the first time you realize something you never allowed yourself to believe. Those marks aren't just proof of what you did, they're proof of who you are. You don't have to erase them. You don't have to deny them. You just have to decide what to do with them now. The confrontation doesn't end when the Colonel leaves. In fact, it doesn't end at all. It ripples outward, seeping into corners of your life you never expected. The next morning, you notice the looks. Subtle, careful, but lingering longer than before. A sergeant glances twice at you in the mess hall. A medic pauses when you enter the clinic. Whispers trail off when you pass. You don't need to hear the words to know what's spreading. The rifle's story has slipped beyond the room. And with it, your silence is gone. At first, the ripple feels like a storm swelling overhead. Veterans you barely know reach out, some with support, others with suspicion. Is it true? One woman texts you late at night, her words hesitant, as though she's scared to be caught asking. Another sends a blunt message. Finally. About time someone said it. It's then you realize this isn't just about you. That rifle is a mirror, and suddenly others see themselves reflected in it. You remember reading an NBC News report about women veterans who found their medical claims dismissed because their combat roles weren't recognized. One woman described how she had to prove her own trauma by digging up unofficial mission logs, essentially fighting two wars, the one overseas and the one at home. Her story isn't an anomaly, it's a pattern. And now you see yourself in it more clearly than ever. Here's the surprising part. Tucked into a Military Times column, there was a quirky tidbit about how some veterans groups overseas actually welcome unofficial tallies. In certain Eastern European veteran clubs, tally marks are displayed proudly on banners, almost like badges. They believe it keeps history honest, refusing to let bureaucrats erase the grit. You think about that contrast, about how here the marks must be hidden, while elsewhere they're honoured. The debates start online before you even know it. A photo leaks. Someone must have snapped it when the rifle was logged for maintenance. Grainy but clear enough, the rows of marks etched into the buttstock. The caption, "Whose rifle is this?" The comments ignite instantly. Some veterans write, "Respect, that's service in its rawest form." Others sneer, "Fake, nobody lets scratches like that slide past inspection." Then the cruel ones, trying to look tough, another exaggerator. Scrolling through it, your stomach knots. The anonymity of screens makes every judgment sting sharper, because none of them know it's you, yet all of them are talking about you. But among the noise, you spot something else. Long threads of discussion, veterans dissecting the meaning of marks, of memory, of silence. A retired army captain posts, "These marks are what the official record will never show, the unfiled truths. If it's hers, let her decide how to carry it." That comment alone pulls in hundreds of replies, arguments spinning like tracer fire in the night. The ripple grows bigger than you. Policy discussions stir at the VA. A federal news network piece highlights renewed concerns over unrecorded combat roles, quoting officials who admit inconsistencies in how women's service was documented. There is evidence of omission, one bureaucrat concedes, but revising the record is complex. That word complex burns in your ears. It's not complex. It's cowardice wrapped in paperwork. At the same time, protests bubble in front of VA hospitals. You catch glimpses on the news, small groups of veterans carrying signs, some scrawled with Sharpie, others neatly printed. One reads, "Don't erase us." Another says, "Truth has a body count." You wonder if they know about you specifically, or if your rifle is just a spark for something bigger, maybe both. In the barracks, the conversation is unavoidable. Someone asks casually in the hall, "Ever heard of that rifle with the scratches?" His buddy shrugs, says, "Yeah, someone trying to play hero." You want to shout to tell them it wasn't about heroics. It was about survival, about keeping count when no one else would. But instead, you just walk past, letting the words bounce off. Later that night, another soldier, young, new, still carrying the fresh look of someone unscarred, approaches you timidly. "Ma'am," he stammers, "if that rifle, if it was yours, can I just say it matters, even if they don't write it down." His words linger long after he walks away. On a fringe corner of the internet, you find a surprising anecdote. A veterans historian posted about how in Vietnam, soldiers sometimes carved notches into their helmets for every day survived rather than every kill. Counting life instead of death, he called it. You wonder if maybe that's what the world would prefer, that your marks represented something easier to swallow. But you didn't carve days, you carved truth, and now the truth won't stay hidden. The colonel calls you in again, his office dim, blinds half drawn. He looks tired, older than yesterday. "You see what's happening?" he asks. You nod. Of course you see it. He doesn't reprimand you, doesn't order you to deny it. Instead he says, "They're arguing over your life like it's theory. You need to choose whether to enter that argument or let them decide it without you." The choice feels impossible, but it's real. You can step forward, own the marks, and risk everything that comes with it. Doubt, scorn, maybe even punishment. Or you can step back, remain anonymous, and watch as others twist your story into whatever suits them. Outside, the ripple widens further. Podcasts pick up the photo of the rifle, spinning narratives. Some call it an inspiring symbol of sacrifice. Others condemn it as glorification. A late-night host even cracks a sarcastic joke. Imagine getting written up for doodling on government property. The audience laughs, and you feel the punch of it in your chest. They're laughing at what you lived. But in another corner of the internet, a clip goes viral. A female veteran speaking at a small rally, her voice breaking as she says, "Every time one of us stays silent, another part of our history dies." The clip racks up millions of views, and you sit in the dark, staring at the screen, realizing she could have been speaking for you. The ripple has become a wave, and no matter how much you want to retreat, the tide is pulling you forward. The rifle isn't just an object anymore. It's a catalyst, a flashpoint, a question with no easy answer. Will you let others decide what your story means, or will you step into the light and tell it yourself? Because if you don't, you already know what happens. The whispers grow, the arguments harden, and your silence will be written into the margins as if it were consent. And deep down you know you can't let that happen. Not anymore. The wave doesn't crash all at once. It builds, steady and relentless, until standing still feels like drowning. You wake each day to a new headline, a new post, a new conversation about the rifle. The marks you carved in solitude are now public property, debated by strangers, analysed by experts, dismissed by skeptics, honoured by allies. The one thing you never expected, the world noticing, has finally happened, and now you must decide what to do with it. The colonel calls you in again. His office is lit by the slant of afternoon sun, dust floating in the beams like fragments of unspoken words. He doesn't sit behind his desk this time. He stands, hands clasped behind his back, his posture more human than hierarchical. "You can't stay in the shadows," he says. "If you do, they'll turn this into whatever serves them best, and you'll be left behind in the very story you lived." His words sting because they're true. You've seen it before. In a Stripes article, a woman veteran described how her silence after a traumatic deployment allowed others to rewrite her role, casting her as a bystander when she had been at the center. "By the time I spoke up," she admitted, "it was like arguing with a stone wall." You don't want to become that. You don't want your rifle to be claimed by everyone but you. Still, you hesitate. The memory of disbelief, the sting of mockery, weighs heavy. You imagine stepping forward, revealing yourself as the rifle's owner, and you hear the inevitable chorus: liar, exaggerator, fraud. Veterans' debates are brutal. You've seen how they can tear someone down in a heartbeat. But then you recall a quirky fact from a Vets Serve feature. In some Native American warrior traditions, women who fought carved symbols into their tools, not for recognition but for accountability. The marks were a reminder to themselves, not proof for others. That perspective steadies you. Those lines on the rifle were never about validation. They were about memory. And maybe now it's time to let memory speak. The colonel hands you a folder. Inside, a draft statement. Not polished, not written by some PR team, but rough words he scrawled himself. At the bottom, one line stands out. "The truth belongs to the one who lived it." You close the folder. "You think anyone will believe me?" He shrugs. "Some will, some won't, but at least they'll hear it from you." When the moment comes, it's not on a grand stage or in front of cameras. It's at a community town hall, small and plain, folding chairs in neat rows, coffee brewing in the corner. Veterans fill the room, old, young, men, women, some leaning on canes, others in hoodies and ball caps. They've come not for spectacle but for connection. Your hands tremble as you step up. The microphone squeaks, the room hushed. You see curious faces, skeptical ones, empathetic ones. And you begin, not with grandeur, but with honesty. "You've seen the photo. You've argued about the marks. I carved them. They're mine." A ripple moves through the room. No applause, no boos, just a shift in the air. You keep speaking. You tell them about the missions erased from files, the firefights scrubbed from debriefs, the medals that carried only half-truths. You tell them about the silence you kept, the silence you thought would protect you but only chained you tighter. And then you tell them why you carved the marks. Not to brag, not to boast, but because you refused to let memory vanish into the black hole of bureaucracy. By the time you stop, the room feels different, heavy, but alive. Later, the story spreads. AP News picks it up, framing it as part of a larger reckoning with how female veterans' contributions are recorded or erased. Commentators argue on radio shows, some dismissing you as attention-seeking, others calling you a symbol of long-overdue recognition. The noise is exhausting, but it no longer scares you, because for the first time your voice is in it, not absent. And in the quieter corners of the internet, something else happens. Messages pour in. A woman writes, "I never carved marks, but I kept every spent casing from the nights they told me I didn't fire. Thank you for reminding me I'm not crazy." A man posts, "My daughter's serving now. She asked me if they'll erase her too. I showed her your story. She smiled." These are the messages that matter, the ones that soften the sting of mockery and doubt. The social impact grows larger than you imagined. Lawmakers mention your story in hearings about revising service records. Veterans groups rally around the call for recognition. Younger service members cite your words when demanding fairer treatment. And though not everyone supports you, enough voices rise that the silence no longer feels suffocating. And through it all, the rifle remains, clean, polished, but still bearing its marks. You keep it not as a trophy, but as a reminder. The truth, once spoken, can't be hidden again. One evening, you find yourself alone with the rifle once more. The room is quiet, the hum of the lights softer now. You run your fingers over the marks, and instead of shame or grief, you feel steadiness. Each line is still heavy, but it no longer bends you under its weight. Instead, it anchors you. You whisper aloud, not to the colonel, not to the crowd, but to yourself. I lived this, and I won't let anyone erase it again. And that's when you know the final step isn't just speaking your truth. It's urging others to do the same. So here's where you look straight at the listener, the one holding their phone late at night, or sitting at a laptop in the morning, or streaming from a couch across the world. You tell them what matters most. If you've ever been silenced, if your story has been dismissed, if your marks, whatever form they take, have been doubted, don't stay quiet. Because silence doesn't protect you. It only protects the ones who benefit from forgetting. Speak, even if your voice shakes. Carve your marks, even if the world pretends not to see them. Tell your story, because the truth belongs to you. And if you've never worn a uniform, never carried a rifle, but you're listening now, then your role is just as important. Listen, believe, stand beside the voices that finally rise, because every story honored is another piece of history saved from erasure. The closing isn't fireworks, it's a steady, calm plea. So as you sit there hearing this, I'll leave you with one request. Don't just scroll past. Don't just shake your head and move on. Carry this with you, share it, talk about it. And if you haven't already, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly find meaning here, because this isn't entertainment, it's remembrance. And remembrance is the only way we keep each other alive. Now, let the noise soften. Imagine the rifle no longer under harsh lights, but resting in a quiet room, the marks barely visible in the dim glow of a lamp. The voices of debate, the headlines, the arguments, all of it fades, replaced by the sound of your own breathing. Slow, steady, certain. The dust that once clung to the steel has settled. The rage that once surged in your chest has ebbed. What remains is the calm realization that truth doesn't shout, it endures. Those lines etched in metal aren't a tally of destruction. They are a map of survival, of moments that shaped you, of history refusing to be forgotten. Picture yourself stepping outside into the evening air. The sky stretches wide and open, stars scattered like faint scratches across the dark. You tilt your head back, and for the first time in a long while, you don't feel the weight of erasure pressing down. Instead, you feel the gentle lift of recognition. Maybe not from everyone, maybe not perfectly, but enough. And with that recognition comes rest. Rest in knowing you spoke. Rest in knowing you were heard. Rest in the quiet certainty that the truth once carved never fully disappears. So close your eyes now. Let the hum of memory fade into stillness. Let the light dim around you. And as the story settles, hold on to this simple truth. You are more than the silence they gave you. You are the voice that broke it.